So you're ready? Shane, are you ready to go? Okay, I think let's go. Here we go. Do you hear, oh my friend, in the place where you stand, through the sky, through the land? Do you hear, in the heights on the plain, in the vale on the main, in the sun, in the rain? Do you hear? Through the roar, through the rush, through the throng, through the crush, do you hear in the hush of your soul, hear the cry, fear won't still, hear the heart's call to will, hear a sigh, startling trill, in your soul, in your soul. From the place where you stand to the outermost strand, do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear? All the dreams, all the dares, all the sighs, all the prayers, they are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear?
Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where we join together to create a nourishing, liberal, religious home with a mission to champion justice, community, diversity, and environmental stewardship in the wider world, or as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. We are glad to have you with us this morning. The UUCS is a very welcoming congregation, and we appreciate your unique backgrounds, beliefs, lifestyles, experiences, differences, all that helps make you who you are. If you're one of our longtime members, or have been with us for a short time, or if you are joining us today for the very first time, we are delighted to have you with us. We're also pleased to have those of you who are joining us remotely. You are equally appreciated and embraced for all that you bring to this gathering. Joining us today as guest speaker is Edie Rice-Sauer, and I would like you to join me in welcoming her this morning. So I have a few announcements to make first. First, I wanted to note that today is Phoebe Daniels' 80th birthday. She's there in the back, and if you have a chance, please wish her happy birthday. Also, as noted in the program, on the 18th of, Saturday the 18th of September at 1 o'clock here at the church, there will be a memorial service for Chuck Smith. There's one error that I'd like you to note in the announcements in the order of service too. It says that there's going to be a board workshop on the bylaws this Monday at 6 o'clock. Normally, we've been holding those, but this Monday is Labor Day and there is no board workshop, so just wanted you to know that. Also, I'd like you to take notice of our newly refurbished floor here. It's the first time that we've been able to gather together. The church was closed last week to get this work done, and today we have a beautiful, shining new floor. I want to bring up to the microphone now Susan Tyler Babkirk to make a few announcements about the social justice program.
Good morning. So many of you may have remembered that we used to have a volunteer fair, but with COVID times, it's probably not the wisest. So in lieu of our traditional fair, groups of the church are taking the opportunity from the pulpit to let you know about volunteer opportunities in our church's committees, teams, and groups. and I'm here representing the social justice team. So our team is a direct way to help fund impactful organizations and social justice projects in the community. We primarily do this in 3 ways. So first, our team creates the special collections calendar for each month of the year based on some specific guidelines. So you're probably very familiar with our special collection list, and that comes from this group. We connect with organizations we're curious about or have a church member involvement, and that they all span an array of needs in our community. The second way that we participate is that we review Make It Happen Fund applications. If you haven't heard about Make It Happen Fund, I'd like to give you a quick information about it. It is a UUCS micro grant kind of project. So, you've heard about micro grants where you can target a project and get something done. So that's the concept here. We support outreach projects in our community that involve church members working directly in the larger Spokane community in accordance with our mission. So funds are available each year through a very simple application process and are accepted from church ministries, teams, or individuals. I'm told that the applications are in the file cabinet in the foyer. I tried to look quickly, but I couldn't find it, so I'm going to make sure that those applications are actually there. But it's very easy. I've done one myself in the past. Just to give you a taste of what a Make It Happen Fund project might look like, we've supported Spokane Pride Celebration in the Park, the family activities section. Maybe you've participated. That was partially funded by the Make It Happen Fund. LGBTQ film festivals, Habitat for Humanity, Smart Justice, a project of Pajals, the Maya project that brought water for Palestinian children, Crosswalk, Odyssey Center, food vouchers for the Sharing Tree at Christmas. That just names a few. All of these projects had church members actively involved, and church members can also designate funds to go to the Make It Happen Fund to make it happen. And finally, we also strive to keep the congregation informed about events happening in Spokane that are related to or may impact issues that are important to our church members and our mission. So I hope that you would consider joining us this next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Please now take a few moments to greet one another and be sure to say hello to someone that you haven't met yet. For those of you who are joining us remotely, please reach out via text or phone or FaceTime to someone. We turn now from our informal greeting of one another to formally begin our service by lighting our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the symbol of our unity and solidarity, of openness and inclusion, of our community and individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt where it has been found. For our opening reflection, I offer these words of Mark Twain, and I'll note ahead of time that while he uses the word man and he, I understand him to be using an earlier convention to refer to all people, regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless. When we set about accounting for a Napoleon or a Shakespeare or a Raphael or a Wagner or an Edison or other extraordinary person, we understand that the measure of his talent will not explain the whole result, nor even the largest part of it. No, it is the atmosphere in which the talent was cradled that explains. It's the training that it received while it grew, the nurture it got from reading, study, example, the encouragement it gathered from self-recognition and recognition from the outside at each stage of its development. When we know all these details, then we know why the man was ready when his opportunity came.
Well, our next hymn is one that's very familiar to most of you. It's sometimes called the Unitarian Universalist Prayer, and that is number 123, Spirit of Life. Please rise as you're willing and able to sing it through twice. Each time we gather as a congregation, there are always those
who are with us in our minds and hearts, and whom we want to wrap in our love and care. We kindle a candle this morning for them. And in addition, for the roughly 3,000 fellow citizens killed nearly 20 years ago this Saturday on 9/11, nearly 2 decades have passed. And for, in the interim period, all of our servicemen and servicewomen who were killed or harmed during the war in Afghanistan, which recently, mercifully, has ended now. And also for our fellow countrymen and countrywomen all over the country who are suffering from the unprecedented deluges, tornadoes, firestorms, and flash floods caused by climate change. Let us share a moment in silence, embracing others who are here in our hearts this morning. You are welcome to say their names aloud as you are willing. Those named aloud and those remembered in the silence, and all those who are suffering elsewhere in our world at this hour, we hold in our community of compassion. We gratefully now give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community in its mission into the larger world.
Good morning. This time I'd like to invite any children or children at heart to come join me for our Time for All Ages. This morning's Time for All Ages is adapted from a blessing by Erica A. Hewitt. Right, great to see so many kids this morning. All right, so a couple of Saturdays ago, we talked about how we carry our religion with us like it's a bag, but we also carry actual bags with us throughout the week, especially now that we might be leaving our homes a little bit more than we did last September. So some of us take our books and masks and hand sanitizer to school every day. right? Yeah. Some of us bring our lunches to school or work. Some of us take computers and other supplies to the places where we work. Some kids carry overnight bags from one parent's home to another parent's home and then back again. Some people, like me, have a church bag that they bring back and forth from church to home. Some people bring things like books or yarn and knitting needles to places where they might have to wait very patiently. And some people even have special bags for dogs and cats and ferrets and other kinds of critters that they want to take with them. Whether you're up front with me or sitting in the sanctuary or even at home, if you have a bag like the one that I described above, go ahead and pretend like you're holding it open like this. There we go. I knew you guys could pretend. Good, so we're pretending to hold open our bags. Are your bags already pretty full of things? Maybe. Do you think that someday they might get really, really full? Probably. Well, we're going to add something to your bag this morning, but don't worry, because it won't add any weight and it won't take up any room. Would any of you like to have some of our congregation's love to take with you to school or to work or even on your travels? If you feel love here on Sundays, wouldn't you like to know that our love is with you on other days of the week too? So let's do that. Everyone in the congregation, bundle up some love wherever you can find it. Make a little packet, and then we're going to count to 3, and we're going to throw it into the bags that the children have opened in front of them. Okay, kids, open up those bags. Here comes some love bundles. 1, 2, 3. All right, that was so fun. Let's add a little more to our bags now. Keep those bags open. There you go. Nice job, Zuri. Sometimes we can feel a little bit nervous when we go back to school or work. So wouldn't it nice to know that we have some courage from the congregation too? All right, let's do it again. Let's take some courage wherever we can find it. Put it in a little bundle. Keep those bags open. 1, 2, 3. Slam dunk. All right. So your bag might not look any different or feel any different, but the next time you see your bag, I hope you remember these 3 things. Number 1, the Spirit of life is always with you. Number 2, this congregation cares about what happens to you. And number 3, if you need more love or more courage, all you have to do is ask us for more. And now if everyone would join me in singing the children out to Children's Chapel. Kids, you can follow me. We'll go to the Thoreau room.
I invite you now into a time of meditation. Adjust your position so you're comfortable. Close your eyes if you like. Relax with slow, deep breaths, and think on these words of William Schultz. Come into this place of peace, and let its silence heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory, and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power, and let its vision change your heart. For our reading today, I offer you these words of the Dalai Lama. When we are motivated by compassion and wisdom, the results of our actions benefit everyone, not just our individual selves or some immediate convenience. When we are able to recognize and forgive ignorant actions of the past, we gain strength to constructively solve the problems of the present.
I use this chant personally when I feel scattered or broken or ungrounded, to ground me back into the earth and to help me back to wholeness. Spirit of the Wind by Star Williams. Spirit of the wind, carry me. Spirit of the wind, carry me home. Spirit of the wind, carry me home to myself. Spirit of the ocean, depths of emotion, Spirit of the sea, set my soul free. Spirit of the wind, carry me. Spirit of the wind, carry me home. Spirit of the wind, carry me home to myself. Spirit of the storm, help me be reborn. Spirit of the rain, wash away my pain. Spirit of the wind, carry me. Spirit of the wind, carry me home. Spirit of the wind, carry me home to myself. Spirit of the sun, warm light healing me. Spirit of the sky, spread my wings and fly. Spirit of the wind, carry me. Spirit of the wind, carry me home. Spirit of the wind, carry me home to myself. Spirit of the earth, help me with my birth. Spirit of the land, hold me in your hand. Spirit of the wind, carry me. Spirit of the wind, carry me home. Spirit of the wind, carry me home to myself. Spirit of the river, blessed forgiver. Spirit of the shore, show me more and more. Spirit of the wind, carry me. Spirit of the wind, carry me home. Spirit of the wind, carry me home to myself. Spirit of the wind, carry me. Spirit of the wind, carry me home. Spirit of the wind, carry me home to myself.
Thank you, Deb. Our guest speaker today is Edie Rice-Sauer. Ms. Rice-Sauer is the executive director of Transitions, a local not-for-profit that works to end poverty and homelessness for women and children in Spokane. Transitions recently developed 24 affordable, high-efficiency housing cottages as an infill project. Previous to becoming executive director, Edie was program director of one of Transition's programs, the Women's Hearth. Edie holds a Master's of Divinity from Vanderbilt Divinity School in Nashville, Tennessee, and is ordained in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Previous to her work with Transitions, she worked for Volunteers of America and for Spokane County, overseeing mental health contracts. Before moving to Spokane, she was the associate executive of the YWCA of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Edie.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you for having me here today. It's you all as a congregation and many of you as individuals have been incredibly supportive of Transitions over the many years, and it's nice to be able to be with you this morning and share some good news and also challenging news about what happens at Transitions every day. I thought I would take a little time and go through who Transitions is. You saw a display board back there, and Susan's probably answered some of your questions, but wanted to describe that a little bit to you. And then I'm going to talk about our values that really drive Transitions and how some of the changes over the last year and a half or so have been really challenging to us as we've applied those values. But also some of them have lifted us up in really unique and new ways and helped us be nimble and creative. So there's both challenging things and successful outcomes. So I want to share those values with you. So Transitions, I find, is kind of an interesting organization, and I've worked with quite a few not-for-profits, as you can tell from Richard's kind introduction. It actually started as 3 little not-for-profits: Miriam's House, the Women's Hearth, and TLC and Educare. They all were supported by Catholic women's communities and were serving women and children in Spokane. And those Catholic communities of sisters, I always think of them as incredibly frugal. And, they don't like to waste any money at all. And they started realizing, why do we have these 3 different small not-for-profits that serve very similar missions, very similar populations, and we're paying all this administrative overhead for them too? Maybe we should consider combining. And so in 1995 that happened, and that's really when Transitions was born. But those early programs were Miriam's House, which serves single women who have been homeless. That's a beautiful home on the lower South Hill. Provides case management and support to those women who live there, and 9 women can live there at one time. The Women's Hearth is down on 2nd Avenue. It's an interesting location, and that's right between Wild Sage Restaurant and Serenity Insurance, so that sort of makes sense to me. It's kind of a magical place for women and anyone who identifies as a woman to come. They provide kind of emergent services like clothing and phones and showers, but also longer-term support like lots of groups that use art to help with grief and loss issues. We have an attorney on site that helps connect women who need an attorney with the volunteer law program through the bar. We have many kind of magical support groups there. COVID's been a little rough on that. I keep looking at Susan Tyler Babkirk is right here. She's the director of that program. And they've been incredibly creative during this COVID time, but it's been a little bit of a challenge to create community there. And then TLC and Educare was started in 1993. That's a big old house. It was an orphanage built in 1896. It houses 16 apartments and women and their children who have been homeless. And then we have an adjacent child care center, Educare, on that same property. So since 1995 then, and those programs merging, we've added 2 new programs to our array of services. One is the Newly Kitchen and Cafe. That's a job training program in the culinary arts. It has 2 sites and kind of 2 program ideas. One is a long-term production kitchen, and that actually is housed in the SNAP building that's just down Woodstock Way. And then we also have a cafe that's more of a training front of the house cafe in the YWCA building on Monroe. So that's 2 different types of services there. And then lastly, the cottages were opened in 3 years ago, 2018, and that is permanent supportive housing. And as Richard mentioned, there's 24 of them. They're net zero, so they're experimental in getting some of that kind of net zero engineering into the hands of people living in poverty who often don't get to experience that. So that's transitions. I wanted to talk to you about us through our values. And we have 4 values that really drive everything we do, many of the things we think about, our evaluations of staff, our program development, our board recruitment, and we really try to think of them through these values. And I was interested, I think these values are very similar to your congregation in the Unitarian Universalist Church. So the first one is growth and wholeness. We believe each individual is a work in progress on a journey toward integration of mind, body, and spirit, with the hope of financial stability, emotional, physical, and spiritual peace. I would say that one of the unique things that happened during COVID was that not only was growth and wholeness something we focused on for the people we serve, the women in particular who we serve, but it also was something that transitions went through. So we went through our own growth and wholeness piece. We started a school, which was not something I thought we'd ever do, but we realized once, previous to March 2020, when Governor Inslee closed down the schools, we'd already been dealing with a lot of transitions, having to figure out how to do the women's hearth, how do we check for temperatures, how do we keep people safe, how do we do case management for people living in our residences from afar. And so we got really creative. But once the schools shut down, I had staff come to me and share, Edie, I can figure out how to serve people from a distance remotely. I can figure out how to really be responsive. I don't know if I can do that and be a mom and a teacher at the same time. And these were people, I have a great staff, and they're really great with crisis. So they're good at this. They know what they're doing. And then when I saw in their eyes that look of panic and terror, we realized we had to do something. And so we decided that not only for the families who we serve, but our staff as well, we would start a school. So we hired a tutor. We didn't really have the money, but it was like it didn't really matter, and we would trust that the leap was worthwhile. And we had her come on full time. We had 21 children sign up to be part of the school, all different ages, really, from kindergarten to like 7th and 8th grade. And we split the group into 2, so we had about 10 people in a cohort. And they met every day in the family room at one of our sites, and really were able to keep up with their schooling. It was kind of an incredible thing to watch, as they also developed relationships with each other. They decided that they wanted to have a student government, and so they did. But it was really wonderful to see them grow. And when you work with families like we work with, who have been homeless and who have moved around a lot, I mean, these kids have been in many different schools over and over. They've shifted where they're trying to learn. We found that they tend to not get to know each other. They're so busy trying to get their lives in order and find housing and stability that having friendships with other kids sometimes goes by the wayside. And one of the things we noticed with the schools is these kids started connecting with each other and getting to know one another. And I don't think we had any idea that would be the outcome of this, but it was really a blessing. So despite the challenges of COVID, it really did make us grow and become more whole by responding to our children. So we have kept that staff person on board, and she's now our youth coordinator, and she's doing summer programs for the kids and mentoring, and then after-school programs. So I think that despite the challenge of COVID, again, it was really something that pushed us to live our value more fully through growth and wholeness by starting school. Wasn't something I was planning on, but you just sometimes have to roll with it. Second value that I want to share with you is justice. We believe in advocating for what is right, honest, and moral, both for whom we serve and with whom we serve. The way I think about this and have watched this for a few years at Transitions is we try really hard to ensure that our participants and their experience informs our program development and how we do our jobs. But that's a lot harder than it sounds. It seems easy that we might be able to get people who graduated from our housing programs, for example, to come back and serve on boards and committees. And believe me, we've tried that. But a lot of times that's not been a very successful avenue for us, and we continue to work on trying to find the best way of encouraging the women we serve to come back and really inform how we develop and grow. I've recently been doing some reading about that to try to get a sense of what's the best tact, how do we really include and value people's voices. And there's a piece of work by Sherry Arnstein, it's called A Ladder of Citizen Participation. She's talking mostly about sort of citizens in terms of government, but I think her premises are something that can be applied to us, certainly, and many not-for-profits. When she talks about participation, she means the means by which they can induce significant social reform, which enables them to share in the benefits of the affluent society. I love that. The benefits of the affluent society. So she's really critical. So a lot of these categories are really critical, but I think she informs us on how do we create justice by getting voice to the table, people's voice of their own experience, their lived experience, as we say. So she talks about one of the hardest categories, or the most negative categories, I'll say, is manipulation and therapy. When we try to get participant voice to the table, sometimes we do this. In this particular category, the real objective is not to enable people to participate in planning or conducting programs, but to enable power holders to educate or cure the participants. So sometimes we're asking people to give voice, but we really want to just fix them. And I would say that during the recent mayoral election here in Spokane, we saw a little bit of that when we asked people about how do we really serve folks who are homeless, but I'm not sure we really wanted to hear the answer that they gave. So I think in some ways what we saw during that time was that manipulation and therapy. We want to cure people. Another category that Arnstein talks about is informing and consultation, and she sees that as tokenism. She describes it this way: participants may indeed hear and be heard, but they lack the power to ensure that their views will be heeded by the powerful. No follow-through, no assurance of changing the status quo. An example of that, I think, is there was a recent article in the Spokesman Review that talked about the North-South Freeway, and that the neighborhood was asked for a lot of feedback, but they sure didn't feel like they were heard, I don't think. And so I think that's a good example of informing and consultation, but really tokenism. Another category she describes as placation. Participants can advise, but the power holders have the right to decide. So ultimately, they don't really have any power in the decision. Partnership is another category, engaging in trade-offs with traditional power holders. So we'll do this if you'll do that. And then lastly, her successful area for participant voice is delegated power and citizen control, where citizens obtain decision-making seats. So this is a constant challenge for us, trying to create justice by getting that voice to our table. As I said, we've tried many different ways. We're just getting ready to experiment with an advisory committee, and I'm hoping that by bringing more than 2 people together, maybe 5 to 10 people together who have used our services, we'll create an environment where they really feel like they have some kind of impact on the service delivery of transitions. So we'll see. It's an experiment, and it's always changing, and we're trying to find the best way to really hear that voice. But justice, how do we create justice? The third value is respect for human dignity. We believe in the dignity and inherent worth of individuals and respect their right to self-determination. So many of the people we work with, actually I'd say all, have dealt with many kinds of trauma. And those traumas might be everything from they're victims of abandonment, they might have been domestic violence survivors, they've lost their children to state custody perhaps, or a partner, racism, abusive bosses, abusive landlords, abusive family members, all kinds of trauma. You name it, they probably experienced it. And they've experienced it many times in many different ways. Well, I'm going to share a quick story about my own trauma, because it's been really informative to me in terms of how is it that I handle trauma, and why is it I expect other people to be able to go from step A to step B to step C, but they don't get to D, they go back to B, for example. And that can be really frustrating as a service provider. And we assume that somehow we can help them go in a linear fashion, but they're dealing with trauma. So trauma always pulls them back to other circumstances, and makes it hard to be, whatever successful is, it makes it hard to be successful. So my own story is, we had just gotten married. My husband's back there, Red Hawk. We had just gotten married, so we were going to Divinity School. I needed a break, and so we moved to East Tennessee, to Grundy County, Tennessee. And by the way, that's the car theft capital of the world. So that tells you a little bit about the environment. Very white, very racist. And so I was a community organizer there, and basically my task was to try to engage the community in the camp. We were at a Methodist camp that had work camps in the summer for kids. But how are we going to really create a community with Grundy County folks? So I got to know a lot of the locals who were powerful people and they helped me to connect with other folks. And I really spent a lot of time with the former DSHS director, Lorraine Titsworth was her name. And she and I often had lunch together, and she would share names of people and ideas. But I was at her house, and we had just had lunch, and so I was washing the dishes, and as I was washing a glass, the glass broke, and it cut my knuckle really badly. I still have a scar from that. Now, mind you, this was in about 1982. To this day, when I wash a glass like that, I remember that moment. It was one moment many years ago. I didn't have it happen multiple times, just once. But every time I wash a glass, I think of that moment. Now, imagine having trauma over and over in one's life, many times in a day. Can you imagine really processing that? When it's hard enough for me to deal with one simple circumstance, imagine somebody dealing with trauma all the time. They have multiple levels of trauma and generational trauma. Surely we by now can understand what's happening, but I don't think we really do. So why then do we keep expecting that a person of privilege like myself and someone who has endured a life of trauma would respond the same? I might in fact be able to go from A to B to C to D and maybe E, but I probably am not going to go backwards very often. But for somebody who lives in trauma, their life is constantly juggling those memories, those triggers that have held them back. Why would we assume that someone dealing with trauma would take step A to B to C? I mean, frankly, dipping a toe into life when it's always been cold, one would anticipate a quick jerking withdrawal and return to past comforts that are frankly known, they're familiar. Why is it hard for us to understand substance abuse disorder, why someone might return to using, or a domestic violence survivor, why that person might return to her abuser? Well, the life outside their experience has not always been kind either, and at least one of those places is familiar to them. The other is scary and not familiar. They know what it's like and return often because moving forward is so frightening. And it just seems really hard for us to understand this. There are many, many reasons why somebody might become homeless. And so we can't just have one response to that person. We have to have multiple responses to multiple people. And I think we make assumptions about what can fix somebody and what can't, but everybody has different needs and many different traumas. Let me tell you a story about C. C was really involved at the Women's Hearth when I was there. And we came to know a little bit of her history. She was probably, if we would put a diagnosis on her, probably a schizoaffective, something like that, really isolating. One example was she refused to call me Edie. She said my real name was Ruth, and she insisted on calling me Ruth. And over time, you just kind of adjust to that. We found out that she had, 30 years before, had gone through a circumstance with her ex-husband where he tricked her in giving up custody of her children. And she had not seen her children for 30 years. Well, she, at an activity that we had at the Hearth, got a hold of some old paper we were using that had her address on it, and she wrote a letter to a general delivery post office address in the middle of the state. We did not know she had done this. And she mailed it. And when it arrived at that post office, and I think she knew this, she had a relative who worked at that post office. Well, that relative managed to get that letter to her son who lived on the west side. Now, this is the kind of weird, magical stuff that happens at the Hearth, frankly. You just really never know what's going to happen, and this is one of those unique stories. And her son received this letter, and he, of course, was skeptical, but he pursued it and made touch with us. And we also were skeptical. It's like, who is this person? Can we really trust this? So we did some investigating. He did some investigating, and we came to realize that, yes, in fact, this was her son from 30 years before that she hadn't seen. We don't usually do this, but we decided maybe the best option would be for him to come to visit her at the Hearth. It was a safe place for her. She trusted it. That way we could also keep an eye on the circumstance. So he came from the west side, and he brought a picture of himself when he was 3 or 4 to be able to show her, to maybe help remind her of who he was. You know, in my mind, I think I had this fairy tale ending that they would go off in the sunset and she would leave and move in with him, and he worked for a big company on the west side, clearly was financially stable. But that's not at all what happened. What really happened was they had an interaction, she was not very trusting, they decided to leave it at that. He, every year, makes touch with one of us to see how she's doing. She's in housing here in Spokane. But in my mind, I think I thought it was going to go somewhere else. And I think that's the thing about trauma and the people we work with is we have some assumptions about what could happen and maybe even ideas about what we think is best. But oftentimes that's not what the participant thinks is best for them or chooses. And that's a really hard lesson. That this value, again, we believe in the dignity and inherent worth of individuals and respect their right to self-determination. It's a tough one. I mean, what is success in that situation? And maybe the best we could do is offer a safe haven for them to meet and for at least some connection to happen and move on from that. The last value is community. We believe that the fullness of each person is realized in relationship with others. Community's been rough during COVID. It's been, as you all know, even just being here together, it's been hard to do that. But we probably had one of the more challenging circumstances at transitions in that in our cottages, we actually had a hate crime occur. And it happened about 2 months before COVID and just kind of right before George Floyd was killed. And it really made us take stock of how we were dealing with racism issues. How did we do policy development? How do we train staff? Because frankly, we missed some cues. And so clearly there was some implicit bias happening in how we were handling circumstances and the residents. So we got to work. And so we kind of recreated our community. We did some book groups. We met monthly with the NAACP at the time president. We wrote a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement with action steps that we look at every month to make sure that we're still moving along that path. We looked at how we hire and who we hire and how we advertised. And we really tried to recreate the community based on issues regarding equity. That work's ongoing. I mean, that will never end, really. But I'm thrilled to see movement. I'm thrilled to see us being honest. Right now we're doing a dominant culture caucus, and that's been pretty fascinating. We do that monthly. So just the work continues to build community. So community, respect for human dignity, justice, and growth and wholeness. Those are really what leads us, what leads transitions, and keeps us grounded. And they're incredibly similar to your values, so that kind of excites me. But thank you for being supportive of who we are in our constant work to grow and change and respond to our participants and our alums in better and better ways. You've been an incredibly supportive congregation, and I thank you for your time. Thanks.
Our final hymn is a favorite of mine, but we haven't sung it very often recently. I like it because it feels like every verse shows one of our values. And I also like the tune. It's a Celtic Irish tune, and it's easy to sing. So please stand to sing Wake Now My Senses, number 298. Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason. Out to the new, join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor, glory,
For our benediction, I bring you this Native American Cherokee blessing. May the warm winds of heaven blow softly upon your house. May the Great Spirit bless all who enter here. May your moccasins make happy tracks in many snows. And may the rainbow always touch your shoulder. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.